Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Well, hello, everyone. I don't know if you're watching what's happening at the United Nations right now. If you aren't, it's probably better for your mental health. Trump is in the middle of his speech to the UN right now as we come on the air, and it is just an absolute fiasco. I will just say that as someone who has never really fallen for the propaganda that is all around the American dream and American patriotism and all that other kind of stuff, I am so mortified as a citizen of this country right now. It's kind of hard to fathom. Like, watching this stuff, my stomach is just churning. Absolutely embarrassing, abhorrent things, the rambling, the criticism of other countries, the complaining about the United Nations building not have been repaired under a contract with his company. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. All right. We have a lot to talk about today. Welcome to Resistance Live. For those of you who are visually challenged and watching on YouTube, I am today wearing a white t-shirt with a gray I don't even know what it is, sweater over top of some kind. My hair is down and in its natural factory setting state, meaning it's very curly. And I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I am coming to you from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. So we have to talk about a whole bunch of breaking news from the last few days. The most significant of which at the moment is this Tom Homan bribery scandal. And I, of course, have to point out to everybody that just because, we all know at this point that it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. They have been saying all along that the law doesn't apply to who they don't want it to apply to, and it will apply to everyone else. But I just have to point out that Tom Homan is someone who has run as the borders are by claiming that literally every person coming over the country, over the border into the country is a criminal. And we learned over the weekend that he took and accepted a $50,000 bribe in an undercover FBI sting where he promised government contracts through ICE to these undercover agents in exchange for 50 grand in a, wait for it, Cava restaurant paper bag. I have to say that on top of this, we have learned that the Trump administration killed this investigation. In fact, there are apparently surveillance tapes of Homan accepting this bribe, and those tapes, of course, have not been released. One of many things at this moment in time that we would like to see released from Trump's DOJ. Now, one thing that I want to point out here is that the story from the administration about this particular bribe has been like all over the place. First, it was that it didn't matter. We had, journalists claiming that it didn't matter. We love Tom Homan, leave him alone. That particularly was Megyn Kelly. Then we have the White House press secretary yesterday saying he never accepted the bribe, even though they had kind of admitted that he had taken the 50 grand before. So all of this is yet another sign of the deep, unending corruption of this administration, their hypocrisy, which is, of course, disguised as power. Because again, they are saying the law only applies to people we don't like. And as for the rest of us, it doesn't matter. We can do what we want. And the question of what comes next is a really good one. Now, I have to remind everybody that if we happen to take back the House in 2026, investigations will start. And it could include this, among many other things, because if we take back the House, we have control of committees, and then the chair of the committee will set the agenda. So I know that we are kind of entering the approaching one-year cycle for the 2026 midterms. It's not too early to get involved in making sure that seats flip where you live. We're going to have a lot more to talk about that in the coming year. But if you want this stuff investigated, That's the way to do it. Because I have to remind everybody, at least a couple times a day, people ask questions on the Patreon feed to the effect of, why can't X person just be arrested? Why can't anybody prosecute them? Well, if you violate federal law, the only entity that can prosecute you is the Department of Justice. And of course, the Department of Justice is currently under the control of the Trump administration and Pam Bondi, who we know are weaponizing what is supposed to be an independent branch of government in order to carry out Trump's agenda and his revenge tour and so many other things. So the Tom Homan scandal is one. I would just say, you want to call for the Epstein files, you should also be calling for the Homan tapes. We deserve to see them. We deserve to see what this man has done. And I am not actually at all surprised. When this story broke, I was not surprised one bit. If you have any understanding of the way that CBP and ICE have worked historically, even before this administration, this is not surprising at all. So again, we've got to be very clear on the requirement here for accountability, and you can call your reps and demand an investigation. And, we got to work our asses off for the 2026 midterms. Okay. We have to talk about a bunch of other things right now, because there's such a conflating series of scandals right now coming out of this administration. So I want to talk about the new rule. The self-sabotage of some of these policies is just absolutely astonishing to me. Like I have these moments where I read these policies that Trump is putting out, and I'm like, do you not understand what this is doing to the American economy? Okay, so the latest version of this is the HB1 visa will now cost $100,000 per application. So what does this mean, by the way? Because many people don't understand what an HB1 visa is. An HB1 visa is essentially a visa that allows foreign talent to come to the United States to work for American companies. And historically, the HB1 visa has been in use up and down the chain in technology, in medicine, in academia, in lots of really advanced professions where we need the skilled labor from other countries in order to make our industries run. And historically, the HB1 visa. Sorry, you guys, I'm undercaffeinated. It has historically cost between $2,000 and $5,000 an application, and it has historically been paid for by the company so that you're planning to work for if you happen to be a foreign applicant. So one of the things that has made this all very difficult and very challenging is that, for instance, Google had H-1B visa holders outside of the country when this policy dropped. And one of the things that meant was that, because there weren't any specifics about this, they didn't know if those visa holders were going to be let back into the country when they came back here to work. There was also a policy issue that said, don't leave the country if you were holding one of these visas, because we do not know if you're going to be allowed back in. So again, this is yet another situation that appears to be both a line of corruption, because I'm sure there's going to be people who are willing to pay this amount of money, but also something that has the potential to absolutely decimate our industries. And I have to say that this is something that had already come up historically in this second administration of Trump, because tech companies, particularly those who are already in bed with Trump, had raised really serious concerns about what limiting these visas would do to their workforce. And yet, here we are. So one of the problems with this, of course, is that because there is a lack of specificity, there is a huge gulf in understanding of what this is going to mean for people who are here on these visas, what it's going to mean for people who are returning on these visas, what it's going to mean for people who had job offers coming into this country on these visas, and how it will proceed from here. I will just bet money, though, that the administration is going to get an earful about this from people like Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook, for starters, not to mention a number of the really prominent hospital systems inside the United States. So buckle up. I saw one stat that estimated that 25% of the doctors in this country would no longer be able to work under this policy. So we shall see. Again, not the wisest decision. For all the propagandist claims that it's America first, this one actually seems to decimate entirely the American economy. And again, it's all based on racism and white supremacy. So what else is new? All right. We have to talk for a second about Jimmy Kimmel. So we talked about this so much last week. Here's the latest on this. Jimmy Kimmel, by designation of ABC, is supposed to return to the air tonight. Two things about this that folks should be aware of. Yes, some of this was consumer boycott pressure. No question about it, because millions of people canceled their subscriptions to Disney Plus. And nonetheless, there's a second part of this, which was that apparently the price of Disney Plus was about to go up. And Disney became concerned of further decimating their base of subscribers if they raised the price of the subscriptions while Jimmy Kimmel was off the air. So that is also one financial consideration that is going into this. However, glitch. Both Nexstar and Sinclair Broadcasting, two of the broadcasting systems that had initially said they would not air Jimmy Kimmel ever again, have announced, as of Sinclair as of last night, Nexstar as of just an hour ago, that they will not air any Jimmy Kimmel shows on their specific networks in their particular jurisdictions. So there's an ongoing conflict now between Disney, ABC, and these local broadcasting networks that are owned by far right-wing companies. And how this plays is going to be very interesting to watch from a legal standpoint, because obviously they are undercutting ABC's profit margin by refusing to put him on the air. Now, I will just point out that you can watch Jimmy Kimmel on YouTube TV if you would care to, and you have a YouTube TV subscription without subscribing to Disney Plus or returning to subscribe to Disney Plus. I happen to be one of the people who canceled my subscription, much to the chagrin of my children, as soon as this went down. And I am not at this moment planning to resubscribe unless and until we actually see some significant movement on this issue, because they made a really bad call. And we simply don't have any indication right now that they might not kowtow to the regime again. So, again, the other thing you can do here is you can call, if you happen to be in a Nexstar or a Sinclair jurisdiction, you can call your local station and give them a piece of your mind and tell them that you want Jimmy Kimmel returned to the air. Like, you can get loud about this. And again, this is something where it's incredibly important that you do reach out. And if they are not taking phone calls, as some are not, you can send them an email, right? You can write an op-ed for your local newspaper. These are all ways to make your voice heard in relation to this issue. So it's really important to continue speaking up. All right. Just about an hour ago, right before he went on at the UN, Trump canceled a planned meeting with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer about the looming budget shutdown. Right before he took the dais at the UN, he put out this incredibly bonkers, no surprises there, post on Truth Social that claimed that oh my God, you guys, I have to tell you, over the weekend and yesterday, I was really having this moment of like, I cannot believe this frickin' timeline. I cannot believe the insanity of what we are living through. Just like you, I had these moments where I'm like, somebody please make it stop. I just want it all to come to an end. Can't I go somewhere for 6 months where I don't have to pay any attention to this any longer until somehow it magically ends? I am totally with you with this. So that my preface is that Trump put out a statement saying that he canceled the meeting with Schumer and Jeffries because one of the conditions that they were going to hold him to in order to pass the budget deal was transgender reassignment surgery for every American. In addition to the fact that it's just nonstop transphobic nonsense, throw trans people under the bus, persecute trans people, persecute trans kids, use them as weapons in your war against the nation. It's also just total bullshit. And, it's so hard for me to read this and simultaneously be like, oh my God, we're being governed by this madman. So one of the things that you should just be aware of here is that it appears that the reason why he actually canceled this meeting is because he didn't want to agree to the conditions, such as they were, that the Democrats were going to set forward in order to agree on a budget. And they were not what Trump has represented them to be. Right? What it's actually about, according to Schumer at least, is preserving the health care of millions of Americans under the ACA, of course, which my and my family happen to be one, and doing something that stops millions of Americans from losing their health insurance by raising those premiums to totally unaffordable rates. I'm terrified of what this is going to mean for us, frankly, in 2026. So, all that put together, we're now in a situation where a shutdown of the government seems honestly imminent. And that's going to mean various things. I will just remind everybody that when the government is shut down, only essential workers are on the job. Someone did ask a question this morning about whether or not each agency can designate essential workers. Yes, of course they can. That probably means that chunks of ICE will remain in operation. But I have to say that, this is also an opportunity for action, because if they redirect, for instance, money from the VA to ICE, or they redirect money that is allocated for Social Security to ICE, and eventually, it will not happen immediately, Social Security runs out of funds, there's going to be an uproar like this country has never seen. So we do not know exactly what is going to happen in regard to this particular government shutdown. But I will also just say that my perspective on this has been very clear. I said it last week. I don't see any reason for the Democrats to give this administration the money they need to carry out their aims. And it does mean that it's going to be a very rough ride for some average, everyday government workers in the process. But that money is not going to last forever. And that's going to mean certain things in the context of what the administration is going to be able to do. And again, this falls at the feet of Republicans. They are in control of the House and the Senate and the presidency. If they can't pass a budget, that's on them. So again, this is something we have to keep an eye on. There is a looming deadline for that this week. And, fundamentally, we've got to reach an agreement on this before the end of the month, which I don't think is going to happen. And frankly, I don't think should. Okay. So we have to talk about the absolutely horrifying press conference that was held yesterday with RFK Jr. and Trump, where they claimed, and I have to just make this very clear, there is literally no reliable scientific evidence to back up the claims that they are making. It's false that Tylenol consumed by mothers during pregnancy is somehow responsible for autism. This is, again, an absolute load of horseshit. And I watched part of it, and what I was reminded of during this was Trump standing up there in the briefing room at the heart of the COVID lockdown, telling people to inject themselves with bleach and shine a light into their body somehow to kill COVID, right? It was literally that scientifically reliable, the nonsense that they were spouting yesterday. Then on top of that, we have these crazy allegations about Tylenol, which I will point out is a brand, right? Not all acetaminophen is sold under the brand of Tylenol, but they said all of this about Tylenol, which is, funded by an incredibly large pharmaceutical company with a whole swath of lawyers. Now, I have been sitting since this conference yesterday thinking about what actually could happen here, because it's very difficult to sue the federal government. We've talked about this here before. Ordinarily, for torts like defamation and the like, you have to go through the Federal Tort Claims Act. All that said, I'm sure there is a crackerjack bunch of lawyers representing the parent company of Tylenol who are willing to try this. And I will also just say that I find it utterly morally reprehensible that they are essentially trying to blame mothers who took an incredibly safe painkiller during pregnancy for the autism of their children, not to mention that all of this is eugenicist, because what they are saying is it's better to suffer in pain than to have an autistic child. And I will say, for everyone who is a parent of any child on the neurospectacular spectrum, believe me, I get it. It is, it's so offensive. I mean, my mind was going to explode while I was watching all of it in real time. And that's on top of the fact that RFK Jr. weaponized the slogan from Me Too, Believe All Women, to claim that the government had been ignoring mothers who had claimed this for years. It is nonsense, absolute nonsense. And also, just so everybody's clear about this, doctors they take an oath, right? To do no harm, a Hippocratic oath. And one of the things that means is that doctors are going to follow, hopefully in almost every circumstance, there's always exceptions to the rule, the science behind this. And there is no scientific evidence of any kind that taking Tylenol or acetaminophen causes autism. It's bullshit. So this is all, very upsetting and very troubling. And also, I think it's going to end in litigation, because there's just no way that if I were Tylenol and I was representing that company, I would sit back and take this. Tylenol has been through some shit, by the way. People will remember, if you are of my age range, a particular scandal that happened when I was a kid where someone put a poisonous substance into like 7 jars of Tylenol, and literally the company pulled every single jar off the market until they solved that series of crimes. They know how to actually handle a scandal when it happens, and it's a lot. I'm just going to say this, it's a lot. And, this is on top of the fact that they're now saying, Trump made these crazy statements about vaccines yesterday and how the MMR vaccine should not be given together and how it's too much liquid for a baby. I mean, dear Lord, it was a train wreck of lies and propaganda. And the vaccine issue in particular is going to kill children. It's going to kill children. Like, that's what they're doing. The anti-vax movement is a murder movement. Like, we need to start calling it like it is. It's a death cult. It's literally has resulted, will result in the death of babies and toddlers and children. That's what they're doing. So this is all an incredibly important thing to watch, but also, calls for RFK's resignation have not stopped, should not stop. He is an incredible threat to the general health and well-being of this nation, and he needs to go. So you can also call your rep, call your senator, demand to know what they're going to do to get this man to resign. So just critically important. Okay, couple other things. Trump finally signed that threatened DO about Antifa, so to speak, that we talked about at the end of last week. Honestly, the language of it is laughable. I read the summary of how they're defining Antifa, which they claim is some kind of shadow organization with no clear leader, or leaders are hidden and the funding is hidden and blah, 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 blah. As we talked about last week, the aim of this essentially is to make anybody that they want to name Antifa be subject to prosecution, investigation, and incarceration. But it's also an executive order. It does not make a new law. He does not have the authority to designate Antifa, whatever that means, as a terrorist group. And so, again, we have to take the balance here of like, it's largely toothless, and nonetheless, they use excuses that they can find through these executive orders to carry out violence against people that they don't like. So one of the things to just keep in mind here is to not panic in the face of this. To make sure that you're not silencing yourself because they are threatening people who stand up to this administration. In fact, the end game of this should be to get louder, not quieter, and simultaneously to understand that they may not actually be able to do anything with this. So again, I know it seems really scary and it's designed to be really scary, but we have to also look at it as to whether or not it has any teeth. Okay, final question for today was about the shadow docket of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is doing really weird things right now. The official term does not start until the beginning of October, and yet they've done something very unusual in a couple of cases recently where they have granted certiorari before a final decision has been issued by an appellate court. And this is something that has now been called out by the 3-person minority, the liberal minority of the court, as essentially an abuse of the court's review procedures. There was a dissent to one of these grantings on the shadow docket written that I think came out over the weekend that was very, very scathing about the court's willingness to just do anything to enable this administration. So, one of the things to keep in mind here is that the way that these things get reformed is through legislation. You want to expand the court, we have to take back the House and the Senate and the presidency. You want to, pass legislation that stops the Supreme Court from being able to litigate things off the regular docket. You have to take back the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And this is one reason, why it's so critically important for people to understand that there have to be lines in the sand for future candidates. Right? Supreme Court reform has to be one of the things at the top of the list. Abolishing ICE has to be one of the things at the top of the list. If people will not commit to doing those things, they should not be running for office, because we are in a position now as a nation where we are going to need a full-blown reconstruction when all of this is over. And people have to have the courage to do the right thing if they are planning to run for office as Democrats, or for that matter, for the Working Families Party, which you all know I'm all in for. Bad news is that it's not going to stop anytime soon. And the 6th justice majority seems to just be prepared to rubber stamp anything that the Trump administration wants to do. They gave permission over the weekend for him to terminate one of the FCC commissioners. he legally doesn't have any authority to do that. And they were like, fine. So, all of this is, of course, extremely disturbing. Trump would not be able to be carrying out the fraction of what he's wanting to carry out were it not for the Supreme Court, because he's not able to carry out everything. I have to remind everybody of that. But it doesn't look like this use of the shadow docket is going to change anytime soon. And this is yet another reason why we've really got to get involved, be organizing, make sure that you are organizing locally so that when it comes time to get to the 2026 election cycle, you're already tapped in and connected. Like, we cannot wait for the electoral cycle to get involved. All right. That's it for today. I'm here every day this week at regular time. Thank you all for your support. Reminder, our 20% off discount on annual subscriptions over at Patreon is still ongoing. You can get 20% off an annual sub as a new subscriber using the code podcast. And also, please don't forget to thumbs up, like this broadcast, subscribe to this YouTube channel, subscribe if you're listening on a podcasting platform to our podcast itself. That helps our reach. And I'm so grateful to everyone who supports us, whether through your subscriptions or otherwise. And I will catch you all back here tomorrow at regular time. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.